Teacher, will you marry my daddy?
She was erasing the whiteboard when the classroom went quiet. Not the usual end-of-day quiet, where kids scrape chairs and zip backpacks and argue over whose pencil case is whose. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that makes you turn around. Megan turned around. He was standing right there. Small. Serious. 5 years old, with the posture of a diplomat and the eyes of a boy who had learned very early how to be still. Wubile. The quiet one. The one who always sat in the third row, watched everything, said almost nothing, and drew pictures that were somehow too detailed for a child his age. He was looking up at her with a question sitting right behind his lips. "Miss Megan," he said. "Yes, sweetheart." And then, calm as a boy ordering breakfast, he asked, "Will you marry my daddy?" Megan blinked. Then she laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out before your brain can stop it. Light, warm, a little surprised. She crouched down to his level because that is what she always did, and she said, "That is the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me." Wubile did not smile. He tilted his head slightly as if measuring her answer. "I'm serious," he said. "He needs someone. And you're nice." She pressed her lips together to keep from laughing again. "Well, thank you for the very high recommendation. But I think your daddy can find his own someone." Wubile considered this for a long, solemn moment. Then he nodded once, like he was filing the information away. "Okay," he said. And he walked out. Megan stared at the empty doorway for 3 whole seconds. Then she shook her head, smiled to herself, and went back to erasing the whiteboard. She had no idea what was about to walk through that door. Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are new here, you have landed in the right place. This is Afro K Storified, your home for stories that will grab you by the collar and refuse to let go. I'm so glad you are here. Please hit that subscribe button before we go any further, because trust me, you do not want to miss the rest of this. And drop a comment right now, wherever in the world you are watching from. Let me know, because this community is global and I love knowing where our family is watching from. Now, back to the story. His name was Shin. And when he walked into that classroom 2 days later, Megan almost knocked over her stack of crayon boxes. He was not what she expected. She had imagined a tired dad. Maybe in jeans. Maybe running late. Maybe slightly frazzled in that endearing way that single parents often are. What she got was a man in a charcoal long coat so perfectly fitted it looked like it had been sewn directly onto his body. He was lean, composed, with sharp dark eyes and a jaw set in a line that suggested he had not smiled in several years and was not planning to start today. His eyes swept the room in about 2 seconds, landed on her, and just stayed there. Assessing. Not rude exactly. But not warm either. Sharp, the way expensive things tend to be. He had the particular stillness of someone who had been trained from childhood that to be seen was to be powerful, and to show feeling was to be weak. Megan straightened up. "Mr. Shin," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm Megan Davies, Wubile's teacher. It's nice to finally meet you." He did not say nice to meet you back. He said, "I got a note that Wubile's been having emotional episodes in class." She paused. "He's been going through some big feelings lately, yes. What's the plan to address it?" Megan felt something flicker behind her sternum. Not quite offense. Not yet. But close. She kept smiling. "We've been working through it. Journaling some one-on-one time. He's a very sensitive." "He's 5, Wubin said. "He doesn't need sensitivity exercises. He needs structure." The smile on Megan's face went very still. She looked at this man. This lean, coated, controlled man who had walked into her classroom and in under 30 seconds managed to dismiss her entire professional approach. And she said very calmly, very clearly, "Mr. Shin, your son asked me to marry you 2 days ago." Something shifted in his face. It was not a lot. Barely a flicker. But it was there. "He told me," Wubin said flatly. "I apologize for that. Don't encourage him." Megan tilted her head. "He's not misbehaving. He's lonely. And he's expressing that the only way a 5-year-old knows how. Silence. He has everything he needs," Wubin said. "Everything except someone to talk to at home, it seems." The silence that followed that sentence was a different kind of silence. The kind with weight in it. Woobin Shin looked at her for a long moment. And then he said very quietly, "That will be all, Miss Davies," picked up Woobile's backpack from the hook by the door and walked out. Megan stood in the middle of that empty classroom and let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Oh, she did not like that man. But here's where it gets interesting. The next morning, Woobile came in and put a drawing on her desk. A house. A woman with long braids, which was clearly meant to be Megan. A man in a long coat. A small boy between them. All holding hands. She stared at it for a long time. And then she put it in the top drawer of her desk and pretended she did not feel anything. She felt everything. That week, Woobin Shin showed up at the school 3 times. Pickup was usually handled by the nanny, a quiet woman named Mrs. Park who smelled like lavender and always arrived exactly on time. But 3 days in a row it was Woobin. Always in a long coat. Always with that same controlled expression. Always managing to find a reason to speak to Megan for a few minutes. First day, he had a question about Woobile's reading level. Second day, he wanted to understand the emotional journaling process. Third day, he stood in the doorway for a moment before saying anything, and Megan got the distinct impression he had not actually prepared a reason. "Is there something I can help you with?" she asked. "He talked at dinner," Woobin said. It came out like it surprised him. "About the story you told the class. The one about the boy who planted a garden for his grandmother. He talked about it for 20 minutes. Megan felt the corner of her mouth lift. "He's a great listener. He hasn't talked at dinner in 4 months. The way he said it. Not angry. Not proud. Just honest, in that careful way of someone who does not let themselves be honest very often." Megan looked at him across the room and felt something shift, just slightly, in how she was holding him in her mind. "He's a wonderful kid," she said gently. "He just needs to feel safe enough to open up." Woobin said nothing for a moment. Then, almost to himself, "I know." He left before she could say anything else. That night, lying in bed, Megan stared at the ceiling and told herself firmly that she was a professional. That she did not have feelings about parents. That whatever softness she had felt in that moment was simply empathy for a child who needed more than he was getting. She told herself that very convincingly. And she almost believed it. Almost. But wait. Because what she did not know yet, what she could not possibly know yet, was that Woobin Shin was not just a CEO. He was not just a cold, controlled man in an expensive long coat who had somehow raised the sweetest child she had ever taught. He was the man whose company had destroyed her family. The name had not clicked. Not yet. Shin Group. She had heard it before, somewhere in the background of her life, the way you hear a name in a news report and file it away without meaning to. A South Korean conglomerate with its fingers in real estate, retail supply chains, and manufacturing across 3 continents. It had not connected to the man standing in her classroom doorway. Not yet. But it was about to. And when it did, everything, every soft moment, every almost smile, every dinner conversation about a boy in his grandmother's garden, was going to feel like a wound. Stay with me. This is only just beginning. It happened on a Thursday evening, and it started, as most devastating things do, with something small. Megan was at her mother's house, helping sort through old boxes in the spare room. Her mother was a quiet woman now. She had not always been. There were photographs on the wall that showed a different version of her, laughing at a backyard barbecue, standing in front of a shop front that had her name on it, holding a ribbon at a ribbon-cutting ceremony with a smile so wide it almost could not fit on her face. That shop was gone now. That smile happened only occasionally, carefully, like something she was rationing. "What's in this one?" Megan asked, pulling a box from the back of the shelf. "Business stuff," her mother said without looking up. From before. Before. That single word that held the entire weight of a family's collapse. Megan opened it anyway. And on the very top, faded now at the edges, was a printout of a news article. The headline read, "Shin Group U.S. expansion triggers wave of small business closures, suppliers cut without warning." She read the first 3 paragraphs. Then she sat down very slowly on the dusty floor. Shin Group. Chairman and CEO, Shin Woobin. Her hands were very steady when she put the article back in the box. She was good at being steady when she needed to be. She had learned that from watching her mother hold herself together after the collapse, after they lost the shop, after her father's health declined from the stress of it, after everything that had been carefully built over 20 years was simply absorbed, swallowed, redistributed into a portfolio owned by a man in a tailored long coat who had probably never known their name. She drove home in silence. She sat in her parked car for 11 minutes before she went inside. Here's the thing about discovering that the universe has a very sick sense of humor. It does not give you time to process it cleanly. It does not say, here is this information, take as long as you need, rearrange your feelings at your leisure. It just drops it in your lap, and then the very next morning, Wubile walks into your classroom with a drawing of you holding his father's hand. Megan looked at that drawing and felt something complicated twist inside her. She had two choices. She could create distance, be professional, be correct, be safe. Or she could let herself be moved by a 5-year-old boy who just wanted to feel like someone was holding the pieces of his family together. She chose the second one, and she hated herself a little for it. The week that followed was a master class in internal conflict. She was warm with Wubile because Wubile deserved warmth. She was correct with Wubin because Wubin deserved caution. She kept her answers short when he showed up at pickup. She kept her smile professional. She kept the distance in her eyes even when his softened slightly, which it kept doing, in ways she was absolutely not paying attention to. But wait. Here is where it gets complicated. He started staying longer. Not dramatically. Not in any way she could point to and say, that is inappropriate, sir. Just 5 minutes longer than necessary. A question that turned into a conversation. A comment about Wubile that led somewhere unexpected. One afternoon he arrived to find her reading to 3 kids who had missed the earlier story, and he sat down in the small chair by the door and just listened. She did not acknowledge him until the story was done. And when she looked up and found him still there, watching her with an expression she could not quite name, he cleared his throat and said, "You're good at this." "It's my job," she said. "Some people are good at their job and it feels like a job. You make it feel like a gift." She did not know what to do with that sentence, so she put it in the same drawer as the drawing, and the dinner conversation about the garden, and the way he had said "I know" when she told him his son needed to feel safe. She was collecting evidence, she realized. She just was not sure yet what she was building a case for. Meanwhile, Wubile was escalating his campaign with the cheerful determination of a 5-year-old who had decided on an outcome and saw no reason to revise it. He told his class that Miss Megan was his future stepmother. He told Mrs. Park, the nanny, to please not make dinner on Fridays because Miss Megan would probably cook. He wrote "my family" on a worksheet and drew himself, his father, and a woman with long braids. When the worksheet came home in his backpack, Wubin stared at it for a long time at the kitchen table. Wubile sat across from him eating apple slices, watching. "Buddy," Wubin started. "She's nice, Daddy." "I know she seems nice." "She is nice. There's a difference." Wubin put the worksheet down. Looked at his son. This boy who was so much wiser than a 5-year-old had any business being. "Where did you hear that?" he asked. "Miss Megan said it. She said, there's a difference between seeming like something and being it." Wubile bit into an apple slice. "She talks about real things." The silence in the kitchen was a different kind of silence from the ones they usually had. This one had something alive in it. "Are you happy at school?" Wubin asked. Wubile looked at him. "Yes." "Because of Miss Megan?" "Because she sees me." Pause. "You see me too, Daddy. But you're sad." "She's not sad." Wubin Shin, man who had sat across boardroom tables from some of the most powerful people in the world and never flinched, felt something land in his chest with the quiet force of a stone dropped in still water. He did not know what to say. So he said nothing. And that was the night he sat at his desk for 3 hours without opening a single email. Just sitting. Thinking about a woman with long braids who talked about real things. Now here comes the part where the floor starts to tilt. It was the school's fundraiser night. Parents, teachers, soft lighting, tables with little auction items, the comfortable noise of a community event. Megan was there in a deep green wrap dress, hair down, doing the things she always did at events, moving from person to person, remembering names, asking follow-up questions about things people had mentioned weeks ago, making everyone feel like the most important person in the room. Woo Bin arrived late. He scanned the room with that efficient gaze of his, and then his eyes found her, the way eyes sometimes do when they have already decided on a destination. He crossed the room. She saw him coming and felt her stomach do something. She sternly told it to stop. "You look different," he said. "It's called not standing in front of a whiteboard," she replied. Something moved at the edge of his mouth. Almost a smile. The closest thing she had seen to one. They ended up standing together longer than either of them intended. He was dry and surprisingly funny in a way that crept up on you. She was direct in a way that seemed to catch him off guard every single time. At one point she said something that made him laugh, a real one, sudden and unguarded, and she felt it like a small shock, like she had just seen behind a door that was usually locked. Dangerous, said something in the back of her mind. She ignored it. They were standing near the raffle table, and he was saying something about Wu Bai's new obsession with space, and she was laughing, and it was easy, it was genuinely easy in a way she had not expected, when someone across the room said loudly, "Wu Bin. Great to see you, man. Still running Shin Group into the future?" And just like that, the name was in the air between them. Shin Group. Megan felt the warmth drain from her face. She replaced it instantly with a smile. A professional one. The kind with absolutely nothing behind it. "I should go check on the silent auction," she said. "Megan." But she was already walking away. And Wu Bin Shin stood by the raffle table and watched her go, and felt, for reasons he could not entirely explain, like he had just lost something he had not known he was holding. That night, Megan sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open and typed 2 words into the search bar. Shin Group. She read for 2 hours. And what she found was worse than she remembered. Because it was not just her family. There were dozens of them. Small businesses. Family shops. People who had built things with 20 years of their lives, absorbed and discarded in a restructuring that looked clean on paper and was devastating in practice. The articles were careful. Corporate language. Value optimization. Strategic consolidation. But between the lines, if you knew how to read between the lines, you could see exactly what had happened. And at the top of every decision tree, in every board meeting summary, on every signed document, Wu Bin Shin. She closed her laptop. She sat in the dark. And for the first time since this whole impossible situation had begun, she felt something sharper than confusion or attraction or professional dilemma. She felt furious. Now keep your hand on your heart. Because what comes next is where this story stops being complicated and starts being devastating. She pulled back. Cleanly, deliberately, the way a surgeon removes a hand from an open wound, careful not to cause more damage on the way out. With Wu Bai, she stayed warm. She would always stay warm with Wu Bai. But she kept it strictly inside the classroom walls. No extra minutes at the end of the day. No lingering conversations at pickup. No eye contact with the man standing in the doorway that lasted longer than professional courtesy required. Wu Bin noticed immediately. Of course he did. The man noticed everything. That was part of the problem. For 3 days he said nothing. He came for pickup, nodded at her, collected Wu Bai, left. She could feel him measuring the distance she had put between them, the way you can feel someone taking the temperature of a room the moment they step into it. On the 4th day, Wu Bai gave her a letter. Folded very precisely, the way you learn to fold things when an adult has taught you care. Crayon on the outside, for Miss Megan. And inside, in the careful, enormous handwriting of a 5-year-old, "Did I do something wrong?" Megan had to set that letter face down on her desk and breathe for a full minute before she could respond. She wrote back, "You did absolutely nothing wrong. You are my favorite kind of person. Come find me at lunchtime." He came at lunch and they sat on the small bench by the classroom garden, and she let him talk about Mars and black holes and whether dogs could be astronauts, and she laughed at all the right places and felt her chest ache in all the wrong ones. He was not the problem, she kept telling herself. He was never the problem. On Friday afternoon, Wu Bin did not wait in the hallway. He walked into her classroom while she was still packing up, closed the door behind him and said, "What happened?" Megan kept packing. "I don't know what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean." Mr. Shin, I've been perfectly professional. That's the problem. He said it like the words surprised him on the way out. You went from to professional. And I need to know why, because whatever I did, whatever I said, Wu Bile has been asking every night if you're angry at him, and I don't know how to. He stopped, pressed his jaw tight. Then quieter. He's finally okay. He's been okay for 3 weeks. And now he thinks he broke something. Megan stopped packing. She turned around. He was standing in the middle of her classroom, and he was not composed right now. He was not the boardroom version of Wu Bin Shin. He was a father who was tired and scared and doing his best with equipment that was not designed for this kind of work, and it was the most honest she had ever seen him. She hated how much it moved her. He didn't do anything wrong, she said carefully. I've been dealing with some personal things. Tell me. She almost laughed. That's not something I'm going to do. Megan. The way he said her name. Not her title. Not Miss Davies. Her name. With something in it she did not have a word for. She picked up her bag. He's safe here. That's what matters. I promise you that will not change. She walked past him and out of the door. He stood in her classroom alone for a moment, surrounded by small chairs and finger paintings and the lingering smell of chalk, and felt, for the second time in his life, completely out of his depth. The first time had been the day Wu Bile's mother left. Now, here is where the story opens up a second layer. That weekend, Megan called her best friend Yemi, because Yemi was the kind of person who would tell her the truth even when the truth was inconvenient and slightly infuriating. So let me get this straight, Yemi said, eating something crunchy on the other end of the phone. You're mad at a man you're attracted to for something he did before you met him. He didn't just do it. He signed off on it. His decisions put my father in hospital. Okay, that's real. I hear that. Pause. More crunching. Does he know? No. Are you going to tell him? Silence. Megan. I don't know. Because there are 2 ways this goes, Yemi said. You tell him and it either breaks something or it builds something depending on what kind of man he actually is. Or you don't tell him and you carry this forever, and every time that little boy draws you into his family portrait you're going to feel it. Megan stared at her ceiling. When did you get wise? She asked. I've always been wise. You just don't call me enough. A beat. Also, and I say this with complete love, if a 5-year-old is already calling you his future stepmother, the universe is trying to tell you something. The universe has a terrible sense of timing. All the best stories do. She hung up the phone and lay in the dark and thought about a man who laughed like he had forgotten it was allowed. Here is what was happening on the other side of that silence. Wu Bin Shin had gone home that Friday night and done something he almost never did. He had called his brother Minjun. His brother Minjun was 2 years younger, louder in every way, and had never once in his life been described as having a poker face. He arrived at the house 20 minutes later with takeout containers and zero patience for pretense. Talk, Minjun said. There's a woman, Wu Bin said. Minjun put down his fork. I'm listening. She's Wu Bile's teacher. Okay. He stopped. Searched for the right word. Could not find one that was small enough. She makes him laugh. The real kind. And she says things that she means, and she doesn't treat me like I'm intimidating or impressive. She treats me like I'm a person? Wu Bin looked at his brother Minjun. Like a person, he confirmed. Minjun picked his fork back up. So what's the problem? She pulled away. 3 days ago. Something changed and I don't know what. Minjun was quiet for a moment. Is it possible she found out who you are? Like really found out? I haven't hidden anything. Not hidden. But there's a difference between being Wu Bin Shin and being what Shin Group represents to some people. He said it carefully, with the gentleness of a man delivering something he knows will sting. You've made a lot of money, Wu Bin. And not all of it was clean. Wu Bin said nothing. I'm not judging, Minjun said. I'm saying. Some people have scars that have your company's name on them. And if she's one of them, then I need to know. Then you need to earn the right to ask. They ate in silence for a while. And outside, in the small room upstairs, Wu Bile lay in his bed with his eyes open, listening to the murmur of his father and uncle's voices below, and thinking about Miss Megan, and whether she liked stars as much as he did, and whether he should write her another letter. He decided yes. He always decided yes. Megan had told herself she was pulling back to protect herself. But what she had not accounted for was the way Wu Bio looked during their lunchtime talks, like the world had color in it. Or the way Wu Bin had stood in her classroom that Friday afternoon with all his composure stripped away, not performing strength, just standing there in the mess of his own worry. She had told herself he was the villain of her family's story. But villains, she was discovering, are rarely the only thing they are. And here is the moment the floor tilts completely. She was at her school laptop on a Tuesday evening, grading reading assessments, when a news notification slid across her screen. Shin Group CEO calls for independent audit of 2017 acquisition deals. She stared at the notification. Clicked it. Read it again. The article was 4 paragraphs long. It said Wu Bin Shin had formally requested a third-party review of a series of acquisitions made between 2015 and 2018 by Shin Group, specifically citing concerns that small business owners had not been adequately compensated or properly informed of the impact on their operations. No one had asked him to do this. The board had not requested it. He had initiated it himself. Megan sat very still at her desk. And then she did something she had not done in 3 weeks. She opened the drawer. She took out Wu Bio's drawing. And she looked at it for a long time. Do not go anywhere. Because this is the moment where the real war begins. Not between her and him. Inside her. And that is the hardest kind. She did not call him. She was not going to call him. Whatever that audit meant, whatever had prompted it, it did not undo 5 years of consequences. It did not give her father back his health. It did not give her mother back her shop. A press release did not constitute an apology, and an apology did not constitute repair, and repair did not constitute trust. She knew all of this. She had the whole architecture of her restraint built solid and reinforced. And then Wu Bio got sick. Not seriously. A fever that spiked on Wednesday afternoon, the kind that makes a child's eyes go glassy and takes all the energy out of their body. The school nurse called Mrs. Park the nanny, but Mrs. Park was at a medical appointment herself. The emergency contact after that was Wu Bin, who was in a board meeting in a building 40 minutes away. And in the 14 minutes before he could be reached, Wu Bio sat in the nurse's office looking small and tired. And when Megan came in to check on him and he reached up without thinking and grabbed her hand, she sat down next to him and held it. She did not let go. She read to him from her phone, a story about a prince who lived on a very small planet and befriended a fox, because she remembered him mentioning once that he liked foxes. And he lay against her arm with his eyes half closed and his fever-warm cheek resting against her shoulder, and she thought, this child. This impossible, beautiful child who had walked up to her 3 months ago and changed the entire shape of her life. Wu Bin arrived 14 minutes later. He stopped in the doorway. Megan looked up. He looked at the two of them. His son asleep against her arm. Her hand still holding Wu Bio's. Her voice still low from reading. He said nothing for a moment. Thank you, he finally said. And this time it did not sound like a corporate courtesy. It sounded like something it cost him. He's okay, she said softly. Fever broke about 5 minutes ago. He just needs sleep and fluids. Wu Bin crouched down to his son's level. Hey, buddy. Wu Bio opened one eye. Hey, Daddy. Pause. Miss Megan was here. I can see that. She read to me. The fox story. The Little Prince, Megan said. Wu Bin looked at her. His mother used to read him that one. The room got very quiet. I didn't know that, Megan said carefully. There is no reason you would. He stood. Adjusted his jacket in that automatic way of his, the reflex of a man reassembling himself. I'll take him home. Thank you again. Wu Bin. He turned. She did not know exactly why she said what she said next. Maybe it was the way he looked in that moment. Not powerful. Just a father in a nurse's office, picking up his sick child from a woman who had been holding his hand. Maybe it was 14 minutes of holding that small hand and understanding exactly what was at stake. For what it's worth, she said, he talks about you all the time. He loves you so much it's almost inconvenient for him. Something crossed Wu Bin's face that she had no name for. That's a very kind thing to say, he said quietly. It's the truth. He held her eyes for a moment. Then he carefully lifted Wu Bile from the chair, jacket and all, the way fathers do when children have fallen asleep in the wrong place. And he walked out. But wait. Because that evening something happened that Megan did not know about, and it is important. Wu Bile, in the back of the car, running a fading fever and half asleep, said to his father in the slow, unfiltered honesty of a sick child, "Daddy, Miss Megan smells like warm bread." Wu Bin, eyes on the road, said, "Does she?" Pause. "I want her to be my mom." Wu Bin said nothing. "I know you don't want to get married again," Wu Bile said. "But she wouldn't leave. She's not that kind." "You don't know that, buddy." "Yes, I do. Full stop. The absolute certainty of a child who has decided. She stayed when I was sick even though she didn't have to. People who leave don't do that." Wu Bin drove the rest of the way home in silence. He put Wu Bile to bed. He stood in the doorway of his son's room for a long moment, watching him sleep. Then he went to his study, sat at his desk, and did not open a single document. He just sat there. And then he did something that had been quietly accumulating for weeks. He called the legal team. Not about the audit. About going further. He told them he wanted a full account of every business that had been affected by the 2017 acquisitions. Names. Losses. He wanted to know exactly what had happened, not the version that had been summarized and sanitized for board reports. The actual version. That could open us up to significant liability, his legal counsel said. "I know," Wu Bin said. "The board will not be happy." "I know." Pause. "What's driving this, if you don't mind me asking?" He thought about a small hand held in the nurse's office. A boy who said she wouldn't leave. A woman who told him the truth about his son without flinching. "The right thing," he said simply. "Get it done." Here is the twist that changes everything. 3 days later, Megan got a phone call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She did. The woman on the other end of the line introduced herself as a representative from Shin Group's Corporate Responsibility Division and said they were conducting a review of affected businesses from a 2017 acquisition period and that her mother's business, Davies Fabrics and Tailoring, was on their list. Megan sat down very slowly. The woman explained that the company was moving to make formal restitution to businesses that had been inadequately compensated. It would not be everything. It would not undo the years. But it was real, it was coming from the company itself, and it was not court-ordered. Someone had initiated it internally. Megan knew who. She sat with that knowledge for a very long time. And then she got in her car and she drove. She did not decide where she was going until she was almost there. She pulled up outside a house that was not small but not ostentatious, the kind of house that says I could live anywhere but I chose a place Wu Bile can run in the garden. She sat in the car for 4 minutes. Then she got out. She rang the bell. Wu Bin answered. He was not in a long coat. He was in a gray sweater and he was clearly working from home, and he looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a private person. Not a CEO. Not a cold first impression. Just a man standing in his doorway on a Wednesday evening, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I know what you did," she said. Something in his face shifted. "Megan. My mother's shop was on your list," she said. "Davies Fabrics. My mother built it for 23 years. Your 2017 acquisition absorbed her supplier, cut her prices, cut her access, and destroyed her margins in 18 months. My father's health collapsed under the financial stress. He never really recovered." Her voice was steady. She had practiced being steady. "That's what your company did to my family." Wu Bin said nothing. He was very still. "And you didn't know I was connected to it," she continued. "I know that. I know you didn't know. But I need to ask you something and I need the truth." "Okay," he said. "When you ordered that audit, when you started the restitution process, was it because of me? Or was it because it was right?" A long pause. "Both," he said. "And I know that's not a clean answer." Megan looked at him. "I looked at the numbers for the first time," he said. "The actual numbers. Not the quarterly reports. What happened to people. Real people. And I knew I had signed those approvals. Not because I was cruel. Because I was efficient and I did not look closely enough. He held her gaze. That's not good enough. It was never good enough. And yes, you made me look. But what I found when I looked, that's mine to carry. Not yours to forgive on a schedule. The honesty of it made her breath catch. I'm angry, she said. I know. I don't know if I can separate who you were from who you are. I know that too. Pause. But I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. I'm asking you to tell me if there's a door still open. Because I have a son upstairs who has already decided your family. And I have myself slowly and unexpectedly and at the absolute worst timing, decided the same thing. The silence between them had weight. The good kind. But here comes the worst moment. The one nobody prepared for. Behind Wu Bin down the hallway a small voice said, Miss Megan? She looked past him. Wu Bio was standing at the end of the hallway in his pajamas, rubbing one eye, holding a stuffed fox. He looked at her. She looked at him. Are you here to stay? He asked. Just like that. No preamble. Because he was 5, and 5-year-olds do not waste time on anything that is not the core question. Megan felt her throat close. She opened her mouth. And that is when her phone rang. It was her mother. She held up one finger to Wu Bin, stepped back, answered. And then her face went white. Mom, slow down. What happened? Mom? She looked at Wu Bin. He was already reaching for his keys. Her father had been taken to the emergency room. Not a crisis, the doctors would later say. A precautionary admission. His blood pressure had spiked, which given his history of stress-related illness in the years after the collapse was enough for the attending physician to want him monitored overnight. He was stable. He was irritable, which her mother said was a good sign because he was only irritable when he had energy to spare. Megan sat in the hospital waiting area and held her mother's hand and tried to regulate her own breathing. Wu Bin had driven her. She had not asked him to. He had just followed her to his car the way people do when they have decided they are not letting someone be alone in something, and she had been too frightened to argue. He sat in the chair beside her, one row back, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd her. He did not try to fill the silence. He did not perform concern or offer hollow reassurances. He just stayed. For 2 hours, he just stayed. And when her mother came back from the second consultation and looked at him with the careful, measuring eyes of a woman who had learned not to trust people too quickly, he stood and said very simply, Mrs. Davies. Wu Bin. I'm glad he's stable. Her mother said nothing for a moment. Then she said, You look like someone I've seen in the news. He did not flinch. Probably. I'm Wu Bin Shin. The recognition in her mother's face was quiet and complicated. She looked at her daughter. Megan did not look away. He drove me, Megan said. He didn't have to. Her mother considered this for what felt like a long time. Then she said, Thank you for bringing my daughter safely. And she sat down, and the three of them sat in that waiting room together, and nobody tried to make it comfortable, and somehow it was the most honest thing Megan had felt in weeks. Her father was discharged the next morning. He came home, complained about hospital food, asked Megan why she looked like she hadn't slept, and then took a 3-hour nap. Life, she thought. It keeps refusing to be tidy. Here is where the story tilts one final time before the landing. The audit results came back. Not just audited, expanded. Wu Bin's legal team, following his directive, had produced a full impact report covering 47 businesses from the 2017 acquisition period. Formal letters were being drafted. Restitution amounts were being calculated. And Wu Bin had gone public with it. Not because the press found out. Because he released it himself. A statement. His name on it. No corporate language. No spin. Written the way people write things when they have stopped calculating and started being honest. He wrote that a company's efficiency should never be purchased at the cost of someone else's livelihood. That he had run Shin Group for 12 years with a singular focus on growth and had failed, in that focus, to look clearly at what he was growing away from. That the 2017 acquisitions had generated significant value for shareholders and significant harm for real families, and that both of those things were true simultaneously, and that acknowledging only one of them was a form of dishonesty he was no longer willing to maintain. The board lost their minds. 2 board members issued statements distancing themselves. 1 major shareholder threatened to divest. The financial media had opinions, loud ones, delivered with the breathless urgency of people who had decided this was either very admirable or very stupid. Minjun called at 8 in the morning and said, "You absolute idiot. I love you so much." Woobin sat at his desk and read the messages and felt, underneath all of it, something he had not felt in a very long time. Light. Not easy. Not resolved. But light. Megan read the statement at 6 in the morning with her tea going cold beside her. She read it twice. Then she called Yemi. "I read it," Yemi said before she could speak. "Tell me what you think." "I think," Yemi said carefully, "that a man who burns his own empire to tell the truth about it is not the same man who built it without looking down." Megan was quiet. "I think you already know what you want to do," Yemi said. "And I think you're terrified because what you want is real and real things can break. What if I can't fully forgive him? Then don't. But don't confuse incomplete forgiveness with inability to move forward. People are not only their worst chapters, Megan. You know that. You tell your kids that all the time." She did. She told them that exact thing in various gentle, age-appropriate versions, when they were sad about a mistake or ashamed of something they had done. People are more than their worst moments. You are allowed to keep going. She had just never had to apply it to someone who had hurt her. She sat with that for a long time. And then came the moment nobody expected. Not even Megan. 3 days after the statement, she was in her classroom after school, organizing the reading corner, when she heard the school door open. It was late. Almost 5. She expected a parent, a colleague, the custodian. It was Wu Bile. In his coat. Backpack still on. Standing in her doorway. "Mrs. Park said I could come find you," he said. She turned. "Crush. What are you doing here, buddy?" He walked in. Set his backpack down on the table. Reached inside it. And produced, with great ceremony, a folded piece of paper. She opened it. It was a drawing. More detailed than the others. A house with a garden. A man in a long coat standing next to a woman with long braids. A small boy between them. And above the house, drawn in careful yellow crayon, a sun. But in the corner of the drawing, in Wu Bile's enormous handwriting, were 4 words. "She is the sun." Megan sat down on the small classroom chair and stared at those 4 words. "Wu Bile," she said carefully. "Where did you hear that?" He sat down across from her, very serious, very himself. "I heard Daddy on the phone. He told Uncle Minjun that you make everything feel warmer and he doesn't know how to explain it except that you're like the sun coming out from behind clouds." Megan pressed her lips together very hard. "He said that," she managed. "He also said he was an idiot and he didn't know how to fix it." Wu Bile tilted his head. "Are you going to fix it?" She looked at this boy. This extraordinary, ridiculous, wonderful boy. "Can I ask you something first?" she said. He nodded. "If I was around more, properly around, would that make you happy?" Wu Bile stared at her like she had asked whether oxygen was preferable to the alternative. "Yes," he said. Like it was the simplest thing in the world. She looked at the drawing. At the sun in the corner. At 4 words in yellow crayon. "Okay," she said. "Let me go talk to your daddy." Wu Bile's face broke open into the widest smile she had ever seen on a 5-year-old's face, or possibly any human face. He jumped off the chair, grabbed his backpack and said, with the complete confidence of a child who has completed a very important mission, "He's in the car park. He always waits there when he thinks you might need him." Megan stood up. She picked up her bag. She walked to the window first. And there he was. His car parked at the edge of the school car park, and Woobin Shin sitting on the hood of it, jacket off, face tilted slightly up at the last light. Not performing composure. Not scanning a room. Just existing in the half-dark with all his edges showing. She felt something settle in her chest. Not everything was resolved. Her father was still fragile. Her mother still flinched when she heard certain company names. The restitution process was early and the outcome was uncertain, and 47 businesses were still accounting for years of loss. These were real things. They would not become small. But something else was also real. And it was standing in a car park waiting without pressure, because he had decided he would rather wait than push. She walked down the hallway, out through the school doors, into the early evening air. He heard her footsteps and turned, saw her coming, did not move, just watched with that expression she had finally found a name for. Hope. Careful and unperformed and absolutely real. Your son, she said, is the most effective negotiator I have ever encountered. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. He takes after his mother for the strategy, Wu Bin said. Unfortunately. She stopped a few feet away. I'm not over it, she said. I need you to know that. I'm not handing you a clean slate. There are days I'm going to be angry and days this is going to be complicated, and I cannot promise you that I can separate all of it neatly. I'm not asking for neat, he said quietly. I'm asking for honest. She looked at him. I read your statement, she said. He held her gaze. It was honest, she said. It was late. Yes. Pause. But it was honest. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said yet, every conversation they hadn't had, every corner of this that was still unresolved and real and theirs to navigate. She had always believed that the truest things were not the clean ones. That love, when it was real, was not convenient or perfectly timed or free of consequence. It was just true. She took a step forward. He did not move. He let her come. I'm still the teacher, she said. That doesn't change. Understood. And you are still, professionally, a disaster. The corner of his mouth did the thing again. Properly this time. Also understood. And Wu Bile, she said, is not a bargaining chip. He is a person. And whatever this is, he stays protected. He's the whole reason I'm standing here, Wu Bin said. He's the whole reason I looked at any of this. Pause. But he's not the only reason I'm staying. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, ask me again. He blinked. What? The question. The one you've been not asking for 3 months. She held his eyes. Ask me. A beat. He looked at her like he was memorizing her. Will you stay, he said. Not in Wu Bile's version. His own. Not because of my son, though he clearly has excellent taste. Because of me. Because of this. Because whatever this is, I want to find out what it can become. She breathed and said yes. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just clearly and fully and like a woman who had decided. And somewhere behind them, from the school window where a small boy in a coat and backpack was watching with enormous eyes and a grin so big it was practically structural, came a sound. A cheer. Small. Triumphant. Absolutely Wu Bile. 3 months later. The kitchen of Wu Bin Shin's house smelled like jollof rice and something slightly burned at the edges, which was, as Megan explained patiently to a skeptical Wu Bin, part of the authentic flavor profile and not a mistake. Wu Bin stood against the counter with his arms folded and the expression of a man who was choosing his battles wisely. Wu Bile sat on the kitchen counter, which he was technically not allowed to do but which had become quietly permitted in the renegotiation of household rules that happened whenever Megan was cooking. He was eating a piece of plantain directly from the pan, which was also technically not allowed, and which Megan had also quietly permitted, and which Wu Bin observed with the expression of a man who had lost 2 battles in the space of 4 minutes and had the self-awareness to recognize the pattern. This is insubordination, he said. This is culture, Megan said without turning around. She's right, Daddy, Wu Bile said mouth full. You don't even know what culture means. Wu Bile thought about this. Miss Megan's kind of cooking. Megan pointed the wooden spoon at him. Correct. Wu Bin looked at his son sitting on the forbidden counter eating stolen plantain and laughing, actually laughing, that real unguarded full-body laugh that had come back 3 months ago and had not left, and he felt something in his chest that he had mostly stopped trying to name because there was no single word large enough for it. This, whatever this was. He wanted this every day for the rest of his life. Now let me tell you what happened in those 3 months, because this story does not skip to the happy ending without earning it. The restitution process was ongoing and contentious. 2 board members resigned. 1 major investor sued briefly and then settled loudly. The press had a cycle of opinion pieces about whether Woo Bin Shin was a visionary or a liability, and the answer depended entirely on which publication you were reading and what they had been paid to believe. Through all of it, he showed up to work, took the consequences, and kept the process moving. Her mother received a formal letter and a settlement offer. She read it 3 times before she called Megan. "Is this real?" she asked. "Yes," Megan said. A long pause. "It doesn't give us back the years." "No, it doesn't. But it's something. It's something." Her mother was quiet for a moment. And then she said something that Megan would carry for a long time. "You know what I decided about forgiveness? It's not for them. It's so you can put the weight down. You've been carrying that weight for years, my love. It's okay to put it down." Megan had cried after that call. A real, thorough, overdue cry in her car in the parking lot of a supermarket, the kind that clears things out. When it was done, she felt lighter than she had in years. Her father, recovering steadily, met Woo Bin for the first time on a Sunday afternoon over tea. Her father was a man of few words and deep observation, and he spent 45 minutes watching Woo Bin the way a careful man watches a person he needs to measure. Woo Bin sat through it without performing charm or impressiveness, which Megan suspected was the right choice and which she strongly suspected he had thought about in advance. At the end of the visit, her father walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said, "My daughter does not give her trust easily. Don't be careless with it." "No, sir," Woo Bin said. Her father looked at him for one more long moment. Then he nodded. "What?" and went back inside. In the car, Woo Bin sat very still for a second and then exhaled like he had been holding that breath for the entire visit. Megan bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. "He likes you. He threatened me with a handshake. That's his version of welcome to the family." Woo Bin looked at her. And the thing that crossed his face then, the warm, slightly stunned, deeply genuine thing, was the version of him she had started to think of as the real one. Not the boardroom. Not the composed exterior. This one. The one that came out in kitchens and car parks and Thursday evenings when Woo Bile had fallen asleep between them on the sofa and neither of them wanted to move him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not walking away when you had every reason to." She considered this. "I almost did," she said honestly. "More than once." "I know." He paused. "What stopped you?" She thought about a drawing with a sun in the corner. About 4 words in yellow crayon. About a small boy who had sat down across from her in a classroom and said, "She sees me with the absolute gravity of someone stating a fact." "A 5-year-old with excellent taste," she said. Woo Bin looked out the windshield and smiled. "Fully. The real one. Now, here is the moment this story has been building toward." It was not a grand gesture. It was not a ring on a restaurant table or a skywriter or any of the large theatrical productions that stories like to use to signify arrival. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. They were sitting on the porch of the house after putting Woo Bile to bed, which had become a thing they did when she stayed late, just sitting in the quiet after the day had been used up. Woo Bin said without preamble, "I've been thinking." "Always dangerous," she said. "About Woo Bile." "He asked me last week," Woo Bin said, "if we were going to get married." She looked at the rain. "What did you tell him?" she asked. "I told him that was a conversation for grown-ups." Pause. "He told me I needed to have it faster because he was getting older." Megan pressed her lips together. "He said, and I'm quoting directly," Woo Bin continued, "that he did not want to be a teenager before we sorted ourselves out." The laugh that came out of Megan was the real kind. Unguarded and full. "He has a point," she managed. "He usually does." Woo Bin turned to look at her. The porch light was on. The rain was soft. He was the private version of himself, the one she had come to know in the months of real things, the man underneath the architecture of control. "I'm not asking tonight," he said. "I want you to know that. You told me no clean slates and I meant it when I agreed. But I need you to know that I am asking. Eventually. When we've had more time and more honest conversations and more terrible cooking disasters that are actually culturally authentic." She looked at him. "You have a 5-year-old's patience," she told him. "I learned from the best." She shook her head. Looked back at the rain. felt the warmth of what they had built over these months settle over her like something solid and chosen. Wu Bin. Yes. Ask now. He turned fully to look at her. Megan. I'm not going to need more time, she said. I know who you were. I know who you are. I know the difference. She held his eyes. And I know what Wu Bai's family portrait looks like. I've been carrying it in my desk drawer for 4 months. He was very still. Ask now, she said again, simply. And he did. No ring. No kneeling. Just his name and her name and a question spoken in the rain, by a man who had burned down parts of his own empire to become someone worth asking it. And she said yes, the same way she had said it in the car park. Clearly, fully. Like a woman who had decided. Inside the house, a small boy woke up for no reason he could name, looked at the ceiling, and decided everything was going to be fine. He had always known it would be. Now let me tell you the final beat of this story. 6 months after that Tuesday in the rain, there was a school event. The spring showcase. Kids performing, reading, showing their work, the whole warm noise of a community that had built itself around small people doing big things. Wu Bai stood at the front of the room. He was holding a drawing. He had been asked to present his favorite artwork from the year. He held it up. A house. A woman with long braids. A man in a long coat. A small boy between them. A son in the corner. And underneath, in large careful letters, my family. The room was quiet in the way rooms get when something true has just been said. Megan, sitting in the 3rd row, felt Wu Bin's hand find hers. She held it. And in the front of the room, Wu Bio looked out at the audience, found her face and grinned. The widest grin she had ever seen. The real kind. And that, right there, is the answer to the question a small boy asked his teacher on a quiet afternoon in a golden-lit classroom. Will you marry my daddy? Yes, baby. Yes. If you have made it to the end of this story, you are the exact kind of person this channel was built for. You stayed for every twist, every heartbreak, every almost and every yes, and I see you. This is Afro K Storified, where every story is built to make you feel something real. Now I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now if this story wrecked you in the best possible way. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment. Was it Wu Bai's drawings? The car park scene? The rain? That yellow sun? I want to know. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We tell stories here that hold nothing back, and there is so much more where this came from. Subscribe, like, comment, and wherever you are watching from Lagos to London, Accra to Atlanta, Seoul to Sydney, thank you for staying, for feeling it, for being here. I will see you in the next one.